Well, good morning. It's 9:30. Time for our Bible study and our picking up into Acts. Acts 25 is where we're going to start. Just by way of review, Paul's in his own defense among the higher authorities. He is now spoken with the Jewish leadership in Jerusalem by way of protection of Lysias due to threat to Paul's life. Lysias really didn't want responsibility of him, so he then transferred him up to Caesarea, where Felix was governor at the time, and he presented his defense before Felix. And then at the end of chapter 24, we read that Felix is succeeded by Festus. And so now Paul is going to be standing, giving his defense before Festus now in chapter 25. By way of review still, was there anything in chapter 24 that really just stood out to you more than anything else? Whether what we've already mentioned once or something new. Was there anything that you're just intrigued by? Remember that with on the Jewish side, Tertullus was the prosecutor. He was the one that was bringing attempted charges against Paul among the Jewish leaders, but also among Felix in Caesarea. Paul's in his defense says, "Hey, I've been away for many years. I haven't even been here. And on my first trip back, within the first few days of being back, this is what's happening. I came to verse 17 to give alms to my nation, to present offerings from the other brothers to the people here in Jerusalem. I haven't done anything, but yet I'm still bound to be wronging these people." Alright, so then moving into 25, we see that his defense gets a little more detailed before Festus. Before we start, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and then we'll get into chapter 25. Our Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the time that we can come. We can study your word. We can study about Paul. We pray that as we go through this study, we benefit from it, and we can apply those things that are applicable to us so that we can spread your word and give you the glory. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Alright, so starting in 25, we'll just read several verses to start, and then we'll make some comments and observations. Festus then, having arrived in the province 3 days later, went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul, and they were urging him, requesting a concession against Paul, that he might have him brought to Jerusalem, at the same time setting an ambush to kill him on the way. Festus then answered that Paul was being kept in custody at Caesarea, and that he himself was about to leave shortly. Therefore he said, "Let the influential men among you go there with me, and if there is anything wrong about the man, let them prosecute him." After he had spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea, and on the next day he took his seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. After Paul arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him, which they could not prove. While Paul said in his own defense, "I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar." But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, "Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges?" We'll stop there and what's going on? What's the setting so far? We've got this new governor, new high authority coming. In a sense, meeting the people is how I read it. And he's being addressed saying, "Hey, we've got this man that you guys have in custody, we need to put him on trial. We need to have a conversation with him. We need to get him off the streets, basically. What else is going on? What else comes to light here?
That Paul's been in prison for 2 years, and he said, because the Felix left him there, because he wanted to do the Jews a favor, when some people are stronger about themselves, but he doesn't want to anger the Jews, and so I imagine him being in prison for 2 years, and now Festus is coming with, what happens next in a minute, but Paul, this way, something's going to happen.
Right. And that's interesting too, because when you look at, by the time we finish chapter 25, Paul has had to stand before and give his defense between 4 higher authorities of the Roman or Jewish people, manning the Roman government, because the Jews bring Paul to not the Jews, but the Romans bring Paul before Roman authority upon the Jews' request. But the common theme is each authoritative person, Felix, King Agrippa, when we talk about him in a minute, Festus, none of them want responsibility for condemning this man. Jason made a point Wednesday night, and I agree full-heartedly with it, that the Romans wanted peace. They didn't want to have any issues. They just wanted to minimize any issues and just keep the peace among Jewish and Roman relations. But when you look at how they do it in a way where it's, well, I didn't think it was best for me to make this decision, so I'm going to bring it to you. Felix is told that by Lysias, the Roman commander, says, hey, I felt that Paul's safety was in danger, so I'm going to bring him to you and let you decide. Then Felix, Festus, has King Agrippa come into town and says, we'll get to that. I'm going to end myself. So several Jews brought accusations of Paul to Festus, and they've come to Caesarea, and they're about to hear these charges. Paul's response is, I've done nothing wrong. There's nothing that you can prove that I've done wrong. What were the charges that they wanted to try and bring against Paul? From chapter 24, 23.
So it's called Moses, it's called the temple, doing a whole lot of things that it wasn't. Paul tells them, really to this preaching Christ and resurrection. The Romans ever do very much, so they can't see this as anything worthy of death. And one part of that I thought was interesting in verse 3, that high priest, the chief man of the Jews, informed Festus, he had come to Jerusalem against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking him that he would summon Paul to Jerusalem while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. Second time, 2 years ago, they tried to.
Right.
And they weren't going to eat it yet. You don't see making that out this time. Eat or drink it, until they do that. But this is something that they plan to do, of course. Festus doesn't do that. He said he's going to catch Caesarea.
Yep.
He sent him over there. And Festus finally should have heeded the talk. And then they headed back.
Yeah, and that's an interesting part too, is Festus didn't just tell them, no, I'm not going to do that. He says, well, why don't you influential men of the Jewish community that have these charges, why don't you all join me and bring them before him in Caesarea and bring the charges at that time. So now, continuing on, verse 8, once again, while Paul said in his own defense, I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar, but Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges. But Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of those things is true of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. I'm going to stop there. Few things kind of stood out to me. First off, when he's saying, I do not refuse to die, hey, I'm not scared of death. I mean, you guys can put me on trial and you can say, well, he's worthy of death. Great. So be it. We read in 2 Timothy how he's content with that. He's run the good race. He's fought the fight for God and for his glory. I'm going to be rewarded for my hard work here, for my suffering here on earth. To die is gain is what Paul says in a few places in different words, but that's the gist of it. He's saying that same thing here. To die is a gain to me. I'm not afraid of it. And he's continued, each time he's had his defense, think about this too, he's maintained the same thing. If a man is guilty, or, let me rephrase this. Well, I don't have any kids, it's the best example, so I'm going to use it because I've had to use it. When you catch your child or a child in a lie, and they know they're caught, how many times do they change that story? Well, it was this. Oh, no, actually it was this. And then you're like, all right, seriously. Come on. Really? You told me 3 different things. Paul doesn't do that. He's kept the same thing all the way through. He's never changed his tone. He's never changed his message. I think that's multiple reasons. One of the first ones is simply because he's doing what God has told him to do. He's spreading the word of God, the message that Jesus brought to us. He's sharing that same word. That's what he was charged with on the road to Damascus. Second part, hey, I'm standing trial where I'm supposed to. I don't need to go to Jerusalem to be put on trial. I'm here before Caesar's tribunal. This is where I ought to be. This is where I will actually get a trial, is how I read it. Thoughts on that? Concerns on that?
When he said that, remember Caesar, Festus said, you better kill Caesar, Caesar you shall love. But mine, you really have to see what he's thinking. You might be better off. Not go kill Caesar. You're going to go to Caesar. You're going to go to Caesar. And then we begin to see that comes back in the book.
Yep.
And then check.
And that's an interesting part too, is how in verse 12 is a verse that stood out in me when I was reading this chapter. Then when Festus had conferred with his council, he answered, you have appealed to Caesar you shall go. That just solidifies Paul is going to be able to go to Rome. This whole time we've been trying to piece together, at what point is it solidified that Paul will get to Rome and do what he really saw as what he needed to do. This right here, I think, is that point where we find that, all right, now it's official. He's had that door open to say, either I can find you not guilty and release you and you continue what you're doing, or you can stay on trial, basically. And Paul says, no, I'm going to go to Caesar. I'm not going to go to Jerusalem. That's not where I need to be. Here, obviously, I've done what I can. I've shared the story, the message that I needed to. I've done all I can here. Let me go to the next step. It's almost like calling for an appeal to the Supreme Court in our nation. You've got the stages up to it. Well, now here's the final stage, how he can finally get there. So once he does that, continue on verse 13. Now when several days had elapsed, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and paid their respects to Festus. While they were spending many days there, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there is a man who Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. I answered them that it is not the custom of the Romans to hand over any man before the accused meets his accusers face to face and has an opportunity to make his defense against the charges. So after they had assembled here, I did not delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought before me. When the accusers stood up, they began bringing charges against him, not of such crimes as I was expecting, but they simply had some points of disagreement with him about their own religion and about a dead man, Jesus, whom Paul asserted to be alive. Being at a loss how to investigate such matters, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there stand trial on these matters. But when Paul appealed to be held in custody for the emperor's decision, I ordered him to be kept in custody until I sent him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So on the next day, we'll stop there. All right, so King Agrippa's coming into town. He's talking with Festus, and Festus is saying, hey, I've got this quandary. I've got this man that Felix left behind. All information shows that it's just a disagreement. There's nothing lawful or unlawful to hold this man any longer. But he's appealed to Caesar. So before I send him to Rome, I can't just send him to Rome saying, hey, here's a guy that wants to see you. He's got to have a good reason to send him before Caesar, other than just saying, hey, the prisoners appeal to Caesar. I mean, that's how the Roman law worked, is they had to have a specific reason of saying, hey, he's a murderer, but we can't find a final decision, so we're sending him to you to make the decision.
He's looking for some, or he considers a legitimate charge.
Yep.
To do that. It'd be embarrassing to say, like you said, without any charges against him, and we'll go ahead.
No, that's very accurate. So what else is playing a part here? What do you all see that maybe I've overlooked on just this whole dialogue between Festus and King Agrippa?
Verse 16, is right, stand up to me. He says, it is not the custom of the Romans. I understand this correctly. Festus is the governor of the larger area, so this place is slightly higher, much higher than Agrippa, the Roman Herods. He would be not as much authority about his government, I'm not sure. But Festus is in such a reading he's come over there. Verse 16, it's not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to the judge before the accused meets him, accused face to face. Nor is accused and then has opportunity to answer for himself concerning the charge against him, testify to himself. So that's it. That's not the end of it. An opportunity to talk.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that Festus is actually setting this up so that Agrippa will be like, hey, I want to hear this, man. I want to hear this story. Because when you look at the Roman, not religion, but beliefs, excuse me, they have many gods. They don't have one God, like what Paul is talking about, what he's sharing within his defense, he's sharing that there's one God. And losing train of thought is not good. Where was it going? Oh, that's where it was. Okay, sorry. Blank for a second. So you see these guys continue to talk about this case, and Festus and Agrippa, do you get the sense that maybe it's almost in a sense of mockery of Paul? Can you see that maybe a little bit?
More so, I think, on the part of Festus than Agrippa. Maybe.
Right. Well, Agrippa doesn't really know much other than what he's heard. He hasn't actually heard Paul. Festus has, so I can see that. David.
I think that Paul was told Paul this, he knew exactly what he was doing because he worked
each of the authoritative personnel that he's gone before.
Because he could walk away at any time, right? I mean, you know, it's not all of it.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I don't know for certain,
Yeah.
but I think there is that chance. If he doesn't appeal to Caesar, absolutely. I think that's where Festus and King Agrippa would be like, release the guy. We can't hold him any longer other than if he's still on trial. But it seems like at this point, Festus has finished the trial unannounced to anybody. He's already stated, and this was a verse that stood out to me. What verse is that? Verse 19 and 20. But they simply had some points of disagreements. There's nothing here. There's nothing unlawful happening here. It's basically a group of people and this guy that just don't agree. Well, this guy has offended them so much that they want to bring some kind of charge against him and kill him. And then, even further to prove that, being at a loss how to investigate such matters, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there stand trial on these matters. How do I investigate if this guy is talking about, if this guy that Paul mentions in his message, how is he still alive? How can I investigate that when it's been several years? I mean, by this time, if my math is correct, it's probably been 12 to 15 years. Easy. Maybe even more than that. Since Jesus has gone to the cross, died, and has been resurrected. All through Paul's travels, that wasn't just a year travel, remember. He stayed at different places for many months, many years. So, how can I investigate about this Jesus? Go ahead.
I just wanted to remind you, though, when you talk to any police officer, the worst situation they go into is domestic violence. So kind of, that's kind of what you have. His people, and you're kind of in charge like the police have it, and I don't think they really want to touch that. I just don't think they do.
Well, I think that's where it's trying to keep the peace comes into play too. It's simply, well, I'm not going to go start trying to ask about this because where do I even start? I'm not going to dig up the past if it means I don't keep the peace. If I preserve my peace by playing dumb, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and send this guy to Caesar, wash my hands. Jews can't be mad at me because I have followed the Roman hierarchy in that sense. This Roman citizen, because remember, Paul's played that card a few times saying, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. I have some Roman plague here. I'm a Roman citizen. I'm going to appeal to Caesar. I'm going to stand before Caesar. Is what is any result of this specific trial, this dialogue, what it comes up from. All this piques Agrippa's interest, intrigue. He's like, tomorrow, I also would like to hear the man myself, is what Agrippa said to Festus, and then Festus says, yeah, we can make that happen. Tomorrow we'll let you listen to him. We'll let you hear what he has to say, and we'll go from there. Alright, so continue on, verse 23. So on the next day, when Agrippa came together with Bernice amid great pomp and entered the auditorium, accompanied by the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Festus said, King Agrippa, and all you gentlemen here present with us, you see this man about whom all the people of the Jews appealed to me, both at Jerusalem and here, loudly declaring that he ought not to live any longer. This is where that, hey, we want him to die, comes into play. I referenced it a minute ago. Well, this is where it really is announced that, hey, this guy, the Jews want him dead. That's the end result they want. Continuing verse 25. But I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death. And since he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to send him. This next part, he's stating to this whole group. It's not just to King Agrippa he's making this comment. And we mentioned this a minute ago. But verse 26, yet I have nothing definite about him to write to my Lord. Therefore I have brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the investigation has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems absurd to me, in sending a prisoner, not to indicate also the charges against him. So this is where Festus is open about his intentions. Hey, listen, I've heard this guy's case. Ultimately, he says, I want to be before Caesar. So I'm going to send him to Caesar, but I can't send him with no charges. I got to send him with something. So I want to backtrack to verse 23 for a second. Great pomp. To me, the way I read this is King Agrippa has come into town. We have to make a spectacle of his entrance into this assembly. This man of importance, of authority, has come to our city. Thoughts on that? Is that accurate? Am I totally off base on that?
That's the important.
Well, they say in pomp and circumstance, like it's a great show of how it's gonna come in, he's got a great year about.
Yep. And remember, with Romans, they have plenty of soldiers, they have plenty of resources, so to put on a spectacle is nothing to them. They can make that happen. They're not cheap in that regard, if I can say it that way. We went over chapter 25 pretty quick. Any other observations, thoughts on what we just talked about, George?
Well, and through this, where we see Festus is trying to find information that's put basically to attach to Paul as he makes his appeal to Caesar, shows what little regard they do have for the division of law, because after hearing them, and that's the reason they want to condemn him to death, he doesn't even acknowledge it as some potential anything, right? As something to charge him with.
Well, and he mentions why he feels that way. Hey, I'm at a loss. It's a men disagreeing with men. There's nothing unlawful about what's going on here. I think, okay, so this has been now 2.5 years roughly since Paul has initially started this whole trial and stuff, this whole stand before the leaders. Because remember, for a while, at the end of chapter 24, Paul had been going to Felix, And when Paul started talking about righteousness, self-control, and judgment, Felix became frightened and sad and said, go away for the present. Felix had some knowledge now. He had some understanding more than what these other guys had. So, Festus coming into play kind of changed that whole, not dimension, but that whole situation with Paul. Because Paul might have been getting somewhere with Felix, but now he's out of the picture. Now he's been succeeded by Festus. That's backtracking a little bit, but if Felix had stayed the high authority, don't really think that Paul would be going to Agrippa just yet. So I think once again, we see the pieces falling into place for Paul to get to Rome. Minnie, did you have something?
I just, it started making me laugh here at the end of 25, it kind of like when someone's at a store or customer services, if someone says, I want to talk to a manager, you find as much information before you get them to them, so you don't look like a complete idiot.
Yeah.
But you're going to take them there no matter what, so I feel like that's really what Felix is trying to do, like, he's like, I don't want to waste Caesar's time, because I can be my head, and that very much was their tradition and their society, so, I mean, I've seen him trying to cover his
That's the conversation with Felix that he had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, after a while, enough was enough. So, 2 years, so it's time to hit the ball. I guess, I would think in 2 years, that's a lot of patience.
Well, yeah, and that's something I had thought about too. It's like, oh, 2 years with this one high authority, conversations, great, no
All
problem.
having a problem with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, at some point, Paul has got to be thinking, hey, when do I get the chance to get to Rome? When do I get the chance to appeal to Caesar? And that's where the door opened up here when Festus was like, hey, will you go back to Jerusalem? No, I won't. He didn't say it that way, but that's basically how we can read it, saying, no, I want to go the opposite direction. I don't want to go lower. I want to go higher. I want to go to the next appeals court, if you will, menu. Thoughts? Any other thoughts? But
We do see that Festus moves much quicker than what Felix did. Felix was kind of procrastinating, held off for quite some time, but as Festus comes in the office, but he's playing on shop and trying to set whatever in order wasn't dealt with during the last, government rule.
yeah, and in that sense, it's almost setting that bar. When you have a new manager come in, they kind of try and throw their weight around. Well, absolutely, Festus, I think, is doing that right here. He's saying, hey, this guy has been left over here from talking to him. He's been here for too long. They-
Can you imagine the Jews that would go home, this anger they had? 2 years, this is festering, and they couldn't come together for any kind of understanding of all this. It's funny about human nature, there are people that hate people, they don't even know why they hate them. And that's sad, and that goes throughout society.
It's interesting to me how Festus has actually been completely open with Agrippa and the people here within the auditorium, and he's just saying, hey, here's why this is happening. This man's appealed to Caesar. Not only am I going to allow that, but I need something to write. Otherwise, it will be an issue for me if I just got this position. I want to keep it basically how I read it too. If this is protecting myself, this is keeping the peace, but more than that, I've got to have something to say. I can't just sit in prison. That's not how the Romans work. Continuing, picking up chapter 26, verse 1. We'll get through some of this for the remainder of the time. Agrippa said to Paul, you are permitted to speak for yourself. Then Paul stretched out his hand and proceeded to make his defense. In regard to all the things of which I am accused by the Jews, I consider myself fortunate, King Agrippa, that I am about to make my defense before you today, especially because you are an expert in all customs and questions among the Jews. Therefore I beg you to listen to me patiently. Paul's done the same thing as what Tertullus did, what he did with, not Festus, who am I thinking, with I guess just as the governor at that time. But with the governor in Jerusalem, he does the same thing. He says, hey, I know who you are. You're known. I'm not going to hide that I've heard your name. I've heard the wisdom you have in the sense of Jewish law, not Jewish law, but just in, what is his name? Yeah, in all customs and questions among the Jews. He's knowledgeable about the Jews and that culture, okay? He may be in the Roman courts, but he's aware of what the Jews stand for, what they are, how they work. And I'm thankful that I'm before you. He doesn't shy away from the fact that he's okay with being here. He's okay with giving a defense. He doesn't say, well, I'm kind of afraid to be here and don't really know what I'm going to say and kind of, no. Hey, it's good to me to be before you. Here's what I have to offer. Here's my defense before you. Hear me out. I beg you to listen to me patiently. Kind of really says, please don't interrupt me. Please let me finish my whole defense, and then I'll be quiet. That's kind of how I read what he's setting up here. So continue on in verse 4. So then all Jews know my manner of life from my youth up, which from the beginning was spent among my own nation and at Jerusalem. Since they have known about me for a long time, if they are willing to testify that I lived as a Pharisee according to the strictest sect of our religion. And now I am standing trial for the hope of the promise made by God to our fathers, the promise to which our 12 tribes hope to attain, as they earnestly serve God night and day. And for this hope, O King, I am being accused by Jews. Why is it considered incredible among you people if God does raise the dead? So then I thought to myself that I had to do many things hostile to the name of Jesus of Nazareth. Now he's sharing his thought process on why he was so convicted to persecute the Christians. He's starting with, hey, I grew up in a Pharisee setting, learning to be a Pharisee, striving to be one. And at one point I was a Pharisee. I persecuted the very people that now I'm seeing before you, witnessing to you over. Verse 8 kind of stands out to me. Why is it considered incredible among you people if God does raise the dead? To me, the simple answer is simply because they don't understand that there's one God. They don't see one God, they see the many gods that the Roman culture believes in. So then I thought to myself that I had to do many things hostile to the name of Jesus of Nazareth. And this is just what I did in Jerusalem. Not only did I lock up many of the saints in prisons, having received authority from the chief priests, but also, when they were being put to death, I cast my vote against them. And as I punished them, often in all the synagogues, I tried to force them to blaspheme. And being furiously enraged at them, I kept pursuing them even to foreign cities. While so engaged as I was journeying to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priests, at midday, O King, I saw on the way a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shining all around me and those who were journeying with me. And when we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew dialect, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goats. And I said, Who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. But get up and stand on your feet. For this purpose I have appeared to you to appoint you a minister and a witness not only to the things which you have seen, but also to the things in which I will appear to you, rescuing you from the Jewish people and from the Gentiles to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes so they may turn from darkness to light and from the dominion of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who have been sanctified by faith in me. All right, stop there for a second. So here we see Paul once again continues on his history lesson. I started as this, and I convicted, I cast my vote against these Christians. I put to death many Christians. I was on my way to carry out some orders to bring some Christians back. They were in Damascus. Saw the light. This is where I was converted. This is what happened to me and the men around me. These are the events that happened. He's holding nothing back. He's telling his life story essentially right here to King Agrippa. And the reason behind to open their eyes so that they may turn from the darkness to light and from the dominion of Satan to God. Are we able to do this today? Like, are we able to be the light for God? Absolutely. For the last 2-3 minutes that we have, that's where I wanted to talk with, is what are some ways that we can be a Paul today? How can we be bold enough to maybe talk into a door opening for us to share God's word? What are some thoughts? Sure.
I think when you hit the example of Paul, the reason why Paul was specifically chosen to be the great cardinal spearhead for the spread of
our convictions will show based on how we teach or how we talk about God or about anything really. I saw Chuck in there.
I'm gonna say, I think one of the biggest lessons from Paul in all this is he's consistent. It doesn't matter if he's talking to his friends, family, countrymen, leaders of the world at that time. Everybody he talks to, he's consistent. And I think that's, you know, a powerful lesson for us, whether it's people we in church, whether we act the same way on Monday morning or Monday night or Sunday night, whatever, that wherever we're at, we have to be consistent. You know, 'cause if you're not, you can see it out real quick. And I think that's, to me, that's one of the most powerful things Paul does. And that really cool.
Two things. First of all, we have to come overcome fear. Second of all, this is kind of a non-violent question I've answered, is the one I've asked. So just because when you see someone, you've got to overcome the fear, and you need to ask them what they're, you know, what they're really saying, and you need to listen to them, be a good listener. But that's what it all boils down to. Be a good listener, and then answer their questions according to the Word of God. The Word of God answers those questions. You know, I can't say, hey, this is how it is. No, I have to gently guide that person through the Word of God. That's what I have to do. But I have to overcome the fear to approach them in the first place, or to engage them in a conversation somehow to get them. I mean, that's how I understand all the great examples, but your question was what we need to do. That is true, what Paul did, but we have to have a gentle, kinder way to be shining light on the hill.
Completely agree. I think both those points are right on point with what we should do today. Listening is essential because if we don't listen, we don't know where they are, where they've been. And I think that's one of the reasons why Paul does say, hey, I beg you to listen to me patiently. Hear me out so you know where I'm coming from.
That's the only way to open that door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But our conviction, exactly right on. If we're not convicted, or if we are actually two-faced and show something different, people will know immediately. So that's where we're going to leave off for now until Wednesday night. We'll pick up here in verse 19 of chapter 26, and we'll get through 26 and probably 27, and we'll finish up there. So thanks for your comments.